My name is Christian Ray, and I moved halfway across the country to build a blacksmithing forge from the ground up so that I could be part of the centuries-old tradition of making beautiful and lethal masterpieces out of metal. It hasn't been easy, but here we are. This is Ronin Blades. Hello viewers! Welcome back to Ronin Blades on this extremely windy day, as you can hear. Last time, we made this gorgeous short sword out of the interior rod of a shock absorber, and today we're going to do our profiling, which I'm so excited about. Profiling is my favorite part of any process, and I'm going to show you why. Let's get started. So this here is our Shopfox grinder. This is such a beautiful piece of technology, but it is dangerous. This is probably the most dangerous piece of technology I have in the whole shop. You gotta be really careful working on it, as I'll show you later. But if you do it right, oh, this thing is beautiful. I can't wait to get started. So grinders like this work with grinder belts. This particular belt I have on here is a 36 grit, and I have belts that go all the way up to 800 grit, and then I have Scotch-Brite belts. Now you might have heard the term grit before when it comes to grinding. Grit means the amount of sharp pieces per square inch on a belt. So 36 grit is a pretty low number. That means the sharp pieces on it are really big. The lower the grit, the more metal it takes off quickly. The higher the grit, it means the pieces are smaller on the belt, so it takes off less. You use a lower grit belt to really hog off steel and get your shape in, and then you use a high grit belt to sharpen and polish up and then make it look beautiful. But before beauty comes the shaping. The sword needs to be shaped like a sword. It needs to be straight, it needs to be in line. I carefully move the steel back and forth on the belt to get rid of any high points, making sure I have a straight taper to the end of the tip. And this is why I love profiling. More often than not, your piece won't look like much before you get it on the grinder, but as the sparks fly, it starts to come to life. And as I move the steel vertically down the belt, I'm getting rid of all the scale so you can see the beautiful steel underneath. Now last time, I demonstrated that you need to go over your work with a square hammer to get rid of marks. These are the marks I'm talking about. Our cleanup work didn't get them all off, so I'm going to have to take time on the grinder to grind away the steel so it's even, leaving a clean shine once I'm all finished. Anyway, once you get all the scale off and everything's even, you can start on the edge itself. I use a magnet to get a little bit extra grip and leverage as I move the steel up and down. Getting that even edge on both sides also creates a central ridge, as you can see here. Once I start to define that central ridge, I have to be careful to make sure it's even by making the same number of passes on the grinder on each side. And with that, pre-grind and profile is finished. Got a nice good shape in, it's straight, tang is cleaned up, and I even got this awesome ridge right in the center, which is hard to do, but it's the best thing to do for a double-edged weapon like this. Moving on to heat treat. And here we are at heat treatment, which can be a little bit of a process, but I'll explain it to you. First thing, we heat up our material, we get it nice and straight, we get it looking like a finished product, we put our maker's mark in it, and then we move on to thermal cycling, which is all about heating up and cooling off the steel to make it nice and relaxed. This way it'll absorb force instead of breaking if it hits something too hard. It looks like this. Heating up in the forge until it's yellow, not magnetic, air-cooled. Heat it up till it's orange, not magnetic, air-cooled. Heat it up till it's red, should be magnetic, air-cooled. Then, get it to critical temperature, and then we quench it. I don't have a quench tank. It's true. As I usually don't make things this big, I don't have a quench tank big enough to quench it, so I have to make one. But after some time trying to make one, I realized why make when you can repurpose. This is a T-post driver, which if you're not familiar is like a tube-shaped sledgehammer, but more importantly, it's a tube that is watertight and the dimensions we need. We found our quench tank. With our quench tank filled and our maker's mark hammered in, we can finally get started with the heat treatment. The heat treatment begins, and I take the steel through its phase changes to relax the molecules inside, making for a very resilient blade instead of one that'll break. It takes time and a careful eye, but soon we are able to quench, tightening up the molecules and hardening our steel.
And that completes our quench. We got our sword in the vise here, standing straight up to help reduce warpage. And once this is cold enough that we can actually touch it with our hands comfortably, we file test it, make sure it's hard, then we move on to tempering.
But little did I know that it was this step in the process that would reveal a big, big problem.
So, bit of an issue. The thermal cycling and the quench went off without a hitch, except that digging in means that we did not get a hard blade. So we got to thermal cycle and quench again. So something's gone wrong. I file tested it, and it dug in again, and I realized that I can do this to it. Swords should not be this bendable. So, I'm going to do some research and see exactly what has gone wrong with our sword here, and get back to you. I'm afraid it's bad news. After doing the research, I discovered that although a few makes and models of cars use high carbon rods in their shock absorbers, the particular car I got our shock absorber from doesn't. That means our little sword here is made of low carbon steel. And therefore, he will never get hardenable, he will never hold an edge, and he will never be seen on a battlefield. But I'm not giving up on it. I use recycled materials or Ronin blades because I believe everything deserves a second chance. So this guy, though he'll never cleave anybody, will make an appearance at Renaissance fairs. I'm going to continue this process, and I'm going to make a nice display and costume sword that, while it won't be lethal, will still look pretty cool. So see you next time for final grind, polish, and then we'll design a handle. See you later.
Ha! The fun one.